Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Zohar, and I'm the marketing manager at Sentrycs. Sentrycs is the leading provider of integrated and adaptive counter-UAS solution. Today, our session we'll dive into the fascinating and somewhat worrying topic of counterterrorism in the age of drones, with the participation of Dr. Liran Antebi, Sean Riles, and Odelia Bokin. Dr. Liran is the director of the Advanced Technologies and National Security Program at INSS, a leading Israeli think tank. She served as an officer in the Israeli Air Force and holds a PhD from Tel Aviv University, researching the use of unmanned military system as part of the counterterrorism operations by democracies such as Israel and the US. Dr. Antebi has developed a reputation as an expert in the field, and over the past 15 years, she has specialized in policymaking and implementation strategies. In addition, Dr. Antebi has been a consultant for a number of companies and organizations, including the Israeli Minister of Defense and the IDF. Sean Riles is highly qualified organizational resilience and crisis management director, widely experienced in leading, managing, and developing high-profile multinational business crisis teams, both in the UK and overseas. He has extensive public and private sector experience working in Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. During the past 5+ years, he has been a UK subject matter expert on the integration of counter-drone capabilities into civilian airports and major national events in the UK. He has led the response to high-profile drone incursions, especially airports, and has been at the forefront of development of CUAS strategies and planning the protection of critical infrastructure, nationally and internationally. Odelia Bokia is the VP of Marketing at Sentrycs, and she'll be talking about the lessons learned since October 7th's terror attack in Israel. Now, just a little housekeeping before we get started. This session is being recorded and will be available on demand on our website as soon as possible after the session. All participants are muted and not on video. This configuration cannot be modified. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the chat box in your Zoom control panel, and they'll be visible to the session's host and will be addressed. Now, without further ado, we'll turn the time to Dr. Liran. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So let's start and speak about drones. I want to share with you the very first minutes of Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th, and it was produced by drone and it was filmed by drone, and this is how it was look like. So today I'm going to speak and to give you some knowledge about how did we get there, how did we get to the point that Israel being struck by simple drones, and all the process that has happened in the world before that brought us to this situation, and maybe some thoughts about the future. So for several decades, it was very well known that there are many countries with drones, with UAVs, but only very rare number of states were capable to do very well surveillance with them and to strike with them. Actually, it was very, very small and unique number of states that were able to do so, and they weren't hurried to sell these abilities to other states. But during the last 2 decades, things started to change. First of all, many states started to produce drones by themselves, and here you can see several names of states that jumped to the party and started to produce drones by themselves, part of the time based on knowledge that they arrived from other places or with collaboration with other states. And at the same time, during the last 2 decades, another thing started to happen. Technologies became more accessible, more cheap, and actually smaller, which allow the appearance of small drones, rhetoric drones, small one, part of them very, very cheap, part of them actually toys, but part of them a bit larger with more capabilities. And the thing was that you could purchase and still can purchase those systems with no license or no restrictions almost everywhere in the world. And part of the times you can buy parts and create a unique drone of yourself. The reduce in the costs and the new technological capabilities actually allowing to put those drones in many fields of life. You can find drones in agricultures. You can find drones in the field of rescue or looking for people. You can see drones in delivery field. And those things are actually in the threshold of changing our lives, in my opinion, because there is a huge potential to involve those technologies in many different fields of life. You probably all remember this video by Amazon that demonstrate their new capability and program while they were planning to bring your purchases straight to your door in 60 minutes from clicking pay at the website. And at the same time, when you were looking on terrorism, so this is what you can find. This is a very nice picture showing two terrorists and one telling to the other, stop, it's my copy of 50 Shades of Grey. Don't shoot the drone. It's not drone that's coming to kill us or doing a surveillance against us. This is something that I've ordered because at the time, drones were more at the hands of democracies, while counterterrorism then at the hands of terrorists themselves. But things have changed. During the years, as I said before, costs were reduced. And actually, if you're looking at this slide, so you can see that on 2013, if you wanted to purchase a drone and to take pictures or video from above, you couldn't do it in one product. You need to combine between a drone and, for example, a GoPro. But only 4 years later, you could do so to buy a drone together with a camera already being controlled from the same device in sixth of the price. And several years later, you could do it in much smaller price and to also get at the same price autonomous capabilities that help you control the drone. And many people and also units in the military have seen this change and started to purchase and use those systems within the troops and were very satisfied from their ability to buy off the shelf, very simple to operate systems and very cheap ones, and to use them most of the time in order to do surveillance and to save lives. Sometimes it was very almost funny because, for example, the Americans discover that the DJI drones that coming from China has a backdoors, but at the end of the discussion, they decided yet to use them because they were saving them a lot of money and saved a lot of lives and still were very useful. And they decided to use them in part of the cases that they weren't, mind that the Chinese will see what they are doing with their drones. But the troops in militaries all over the world weren't the only one to understand the potential of the systems. Also, terrorist organization has understood this potential in those systems. And let me tell you something about the point of change. I think it's 2015. At this point, or until this point, if you wanted to do a surveillance and then to strike with unmanned aerial system, you needed to pay several millions of dollars, and this is only the price of the Predator drone itself, not the whole system that you needed and the preparations and all the things that you needed around it in order to be able to use them and to strike. And somewhere around 2015, drones, very simple one, costs several hundred of dollars, appear and allow you to do a surveillance and to connect them with explosive and actually to be able to do surveillance and to strike with unmanned aerial system, exactly like very advanced states. And this is a very big change that influenced hardly many states all over the world. Let's take the first example. Here you can see a headline about the Paris attack. You probably all remember the terror attack on Paris on December 2015. And actually, it's connected with another headline several months before at the same year, telling about Paris night drone mystery deepness. People were seeing a lot of drones above Paris during the night, and no one knew what are those drones, why they're seeing them, who is operating them. There was not system to detect them or to understand what is happening, and many analysts connecting between the terror attacks several months later and these cases of drone usage during the night, because probably the terrorists gathering information about Paris before the attacks. Another case, actually a bit earlier, this is probably the first documented case of a surveillance drone targeting Syrian military base. Actually, this is ISIS case. They took a DJI drone and with several hundred of dollars were capable to gather information above a Syrian base and to decide where to strike the base from, where there are less soldiers and they have a bigger opportunity to strike and succeed to occupy the Syrian military base. And they have succeeded. And this is something that was documented on 2014 and was released to the internet. And another thing that was published is this very beautiful memorandum telling about a decade of jihadi organization use of drones, and this is something that was published on 2017, which saying that there are documentation of terrorists using the drones since 2007. ISIS were one of the organizations that really used a lot of drones and really fell in love with the technology. Part of them were off the shelf, part of them were improvised, part of them was for surveillance, and part of them was for striking, as you can see in this video that demonstrating a strike on an American Hammer. And this is the amount of damage you can cost with a very cheap and accessible technology at the end of terrorists. During the nuclear summit of 2016, when many leaders from all over the world came to speak about nuclear issues, they had a simulation telling them that an organization, terror organization like ISIS, bought a drone off the shelf and going to use it in order to spread a nuclear material above a Western city. The material will be stolen from a medical institution, but the drone will be purchased on the internet with no restrictions or with no demand for license. And after the simulation, the President Obama at the time said that it's going to be worse than the terror attacks on September 11th, and it was something that really helped to raise the attention not only to the nuclear issue but also to the issue of drones at the hand of terror organization. But unfortunately, in my opinion, it didn't help enough because, as you will probably see in several minutes, states like Israel are not enough secured and defended against those systems. So unfortunately, Israel is suffering from terror attacks from several terror organizations. One of the most outstanding are Hamas and Hezbollah. We're in the middle a terrible war now with Hamas, and we're also suffering from strikes from the side of Hezbollah. And here you can see the usage of Hezbollah. This is against another terror organization in Syria, while they were helping Assad regime to fight another organization. And this strike was assumed in something like $200, which means these are improvised drones with improvised weapon that help them attack another terror organization. And actually, this is very smart, because when you're striking another terror organization with no fancy aerial defense, this is actually enough. And Hezbollah is a very smart organization in these manners. It has state capabilities being delivered to them by Iran from on one hand, and on the other hand, there are terror organizations that know how to use improvised and simple and cheap systems. And here, the video that I show you at the very beginning of my talk, and here you can see a strike on the sensor shooter tower that actually destroyed it and make part of our troops actually blind and incapable to see what's happening on the border, and to use fire against Hamas troops that were coming and getting into Israel. But it wasn't, unfortunately, it wasn't the only use of Hamas in those systems. Here you can see a video was taken from a drone. Those are Israeli troops sitting downstairs, IDF troops, and the drone has released a weapon, and it was hitting the troops. They weren't seeing it before they came, and actually one soldier were killed in this case, and several was injured. And this only demonstrating the problem that we have. This is another case from the current war, and although it's not in such a good resolution, you can see a strike on an Israeli tank, and it's actually very problematic situation that we are dealing here. Actually, I think that it's very anyone can see that we are under a rain of problems coming from the air. Within them, we have the drones, and we need an umbrella, but we don't have a good enough umbrella, and we're getting wet. And it's pretty a shame, because we had the ability to understand and learn from things that has happened before, and to be prepared. For example, we had a huge opportunity to learn from the unfortunate war happening in Ukraine, and to see how both sides, both Russia and Ukraine, are using drones. And if we have something to take right now and to learn from what's happening there, it's about the FPV drones, which are very fast drones, can get to something like 200 kilometers per hour, and can strike tanks and people while they are connected to small explosives, and it's very hard to detect them and to defend against them. And this is something that we think that will happen also here in the Middle East in the near future. If I'm looking at the future, and I'm dealing a lot with thinking about the future based on looking on technology, so I'm thinking what terror organization will be able to do in the future in the field of drones, what's going to be different. And I think that based on off-the-shelf technologies, it's very much reasonable the terror organization will be able to purchase drones or part of drones, connect them with AI, connect them with IoT gadgets and explosive, and actually be able to create a killer robot, which is advanced kind of weapon that is able to strike without human intervention, which is something that's being discussed at the UN for more than a decade now with no solutions. But when looking to the future, I prefer to look on optimistic things and I'm thinking about all the great opportunities that drones bringing to our lives. So I think we need a better protection against drones at the hand of terrorists, because I want that when me, my family, my kids will look up and will see a drone, they will be very happy to think that maybe the pizza or the ice cream is arriving and not something that can explode above their heads. In order to do so, we can take technology and use it for our benefit and to defend ourselves. And I hope that this is what we'll see in the future and will be more protected and can live very good and beautiful life near drones. Thank you very much. So now to you, Sean, and all the beautiful and interesting things you're going to tell us.
Okay, thank you very much for Liran for setting the scene for us. So what I'm going to do is basically offer you a few views based on my own personal experience and the research inside a PhD as well, where I can hopefully help you on your journey to try and understand the current situation a little bit better. It is just my perspective, and I'll give you that caveat, if you like, around it. So next slide, please. So since my involvement in the Gatwick incident in 2018, I've been working in the subject area around the world, and I've worked in many countries, but I've seen a lot of trending. And I've specifically seen a lot of trending in the sense that organizations struggle to decide how they're going to deal with the issue and what levels of investment they want to go into in order to do that. I don't have any affiliations with any particular type of technology, but what I do know is technology needs to be part of the solution, but it isn't the only part of the solution. And what happened to Gatwick that night, you can see the statistics there for yourself. What was very obvious is that the human decision making started from an element of paralysis and then became an overreaction because there was no technology to fall on and to sort of revert back to in terms of a benchmark, if you like, around what had actually happened on the night. And that remains still a controversial situation, I think, is the polite way of putting that one. Let's do it that way. What I will say to you, though, is that what really came out of that night, which was the most important thing from the UK government, was this decision to do this paradigm shift in cross-government cooperation that still exists today. I'm very proud of the fact that I'm part of that community, and it's quite a small gene pool in the UK of people who know what they're talking about, but it is very cross-government, and that's definitely the way the future needs to be. Next slide, please. So what I would offer to you, and I do this with organizations that I talk to about this subject, is I would say these are the headings that I think you need to consider if you're thinking of getting into the business of counter UAS. Now, whether that's looking at the framework as a whole there, or whether it's looking at each individual title, the point I would make is if you ignore one of those titles, there's a real danger in the trends and the experience that I've seen that you will miss something. You will miss something on the journey and the whole reason as to why you're setting out to do what you will do. And invariably, you will not necessarily create the proportionate response that you're seeking to achieve that's culturally fluent for your organization. Now, I'm not going to go through all of those headings in individual detail, but I would just leave you there to look at them and you can see why they would be important. Some are more important than others, but the point being is you can't really ignore them. The reason why I use the concept of a resilience framework is that one of the biggest trends I've seen in the 5 years is that if you look at it as an isolated sport, counter UAS is going to be ineffective if it's not integrated into the wider security framework that the organization has got. And if you take an airport, there will be very established security procedures in place for that. So you need to be designing a counter UAS response that just seamlessly fits into that existent framework of security. And I think one of the biggest differences between other security events and this is the timescales in which we're talking about this thing happening to you. It's going to happen to you within minutes and seconds, and it's going to be over within minutes and seconds. So you have to be extremely resilient and robust as an organization to be able to respond to that within those kind of timescales. I'll cover that in a little bit more detail in a moment. But what I will say to you is that the commercial drivers are more prevalent in the development of the drone and the drone technology than they are in the counter UAS technology. So we are inherently in an arms race. And it's understanding the fact that we're in an arms race between the desire for drone manufacturers to harden their systems, sometimes under a guise of being more robust for normal operations, but it's obviously also potentially for anti-law enforcement decisions for them to harden them. And then that counter arms race of making sure that law enforcement have got the technology to be able to deal with those modifications. Next slide, please. I find the idea of looking at the issue in the concept of 3 drone ages sometimes quite useful to help people come into this space. I argue, and this is purely my view, I argue that before Gatwick, we were arguably in the first drone age, where we knew they existed, we knew they were capable of disruption, but we didn't quite know to what extent they could be and how easily they could create huge levels of disruption, and Gatwick demonstrated that. But thankfully, around the world, within a very relatively short period of time, that was contextualized into less high levels of disruption, but still quite significant disruption in comparison to the cost of the actual drone and the effort taken by the nefarious actor that using it. I would suggest that post Gatwick, we ended up in that second drone age where copycats appeared all around the world and the drone sales went through the roof because people now were aware of it, not necessarily to do nefarious actions, but certainly there as a hobby or something that they would then subsequently feel they need to bring into their lives, either commercially or privately for recreational use. And as a result, we threw ourselves, I think, into that. And my point on all of this is I think Ukraine and now Hamas and Israel has given us, I think, a catapult into the third drone age. A third drone age where if I was to use a metaphor, I would suggest we're going from bow and arrow to gunpowder in a matter of months as opposed to years, as history would tell us. Because as we're all aware, both the situation in Israel and the situation in Ukraine is essentially a battlefield lab for both sides of the coin, both the UAS providers and the counter UAS systems. And specifically in Ukraine, technology has been modified literally on a weekly basis on the basis of feedback from the front line. And that would have been 10 years of R&D anywhere else. And if we accept that and we understand that that capability is out there and is being developed at such a high pace, I would suggest to you it's probably the quickest development of battlefield technology and lethal capability in military history. And that stuff's going to go somewhere at some stage when those hostilities recede. Next slide, please. But obviously, luckily, we're not seeing a huge migration. We're not seeing any migration necessarily at the moment from those kind of situations. But I think we would all agree, particularly those security professionals amongst you on this call, that we would be extremely naive to think that it's not coming. Because it'll only be a matter of time when those very experienced and battle-hardened drone pilots are either paid or idealistically motivated to use their experience against us, whatever that means when I say us. But coupled with that, internationally, I've noticed a reduction in the fear of prosecution of not necessarily nefarious drone use, but certainly nuisance drone use. And those of you in law enforcement will appreciate that nuisance drone use can be just as bad as nefarious because of the amount of security assets that it ties up. And at the same time, we're seeing a large uptick in the use of criminal activity in drone use, whether that be with cartels in Central and South America, or whether it's just across the prison community across the rest of the world. The reality is criminals are seeing the abilities that these drones can bring to their activities, and it's growing. What I think we should do is we should just accept the fact that whether we like it or not, there is a democratization of low-level airspace. We've heard about the Amazon deliveries; they're happening already. Pizzas are coming. The reality is, it's no longer a figment of our science fiction imagination. It's there. And those of you that are aware of the resilient cities enterprises around the world, where basically drones are being hardwired into the use of into normal civil society use in certain new future designs of cities around the world. And that's an interesting concept because within that there needs to be some form of automatic number plate recognition system or something equivalent to that hardwired into that at the same time. So it's an exciting opportunity, but it gives us threats at the same time if you look at the lessons that will come out of Ukraine. Next slide, please. I use this slide to try and understand and help people understand, if you like, who are these people that are doing these things to us and why are they necessarily doing it? It's not based around intelligence, it's based around an analysis of trending. And I would just focus you in on the two green boxes in the middle, understanding how an actor is influenced, what have they got to their disposal to do something, and then what intent do we think is being displayed by what it is that they try to do, either by seeking massive disruption or by possibly surveillance that's been interrupted, or by the delivery of a lethal payload. And if you look at the grey boxes around the edge of that, then none of those should be a surprise to any of you on the call. But I think it's something that doesn't happen very early on in a process of an organization stepping out onto this journey of trying to achieve counter UAS excellence, if you like, because understanding what it is that might happen to you and being very proportionate in your response to that will give you a framework from which to work. Next slide, please. And the context of that, if you like, is having worked on a couple of major events internationally, and certainly a lot of major events in the United Kingdom, the idea of planning for major events where we know there's an increase in drone use, either because an individual just wants their own shot of that event, or the potential of a real nefarious actor. Now, those serious lethal acts have happened. They've happened around the world, assassination attempts and other things. Thankfully, not very often, but they do happen. So we can't ignore this anymore. And certainly there is legislation in certain countries that is forcing law enforcement to consider all kinds of security threats, not least of which this type in particular. And there's one thing that's happened in the last few days that really concerned me when I noticed it came out on Fox News, is that the reporting of the death of the 3 US servicemen, for example, that's happened in country, and this is open source and it's available on Fox News website, is allegedly down to the fact of a misidentification of a friendly drone versus the hostile drone inbound. And those of you that are working in law enforcement, we know that there's a desire for the use of friendly drones in routine activity, but there's always got to be a health warning with that, because there is such an easy ability for the bad drone to hide behind it or hide within the electronic footprint of that. And that essentially might be what's happened in the Middle East. Next slide, please. What I would say to you is, one of the biggest observations I've noticed is that unless you look at counter UES as a multidisciplined response, you will just always be setting yourself up to fail to some degree. It's got to be that level of cooperation. It's got to be that level of openness between the different players within it. It's got to be multidisciplined. It's got to be multifaceted, multi-layered, all of the multis you can imagine. It has to be, because there is no silver bullet of tech. There is good tech and there's not so good tech. And I don't judge on that. I see results, and I've seen some of the best tech not necessarily work the way it was meant to do, and I've seen some of the cheaper tech work better than others. So the point being is, tech needs to be part of the solution, but if the whole solution has to be resilient by design, hence resilient framework, and within that, I feel that needs to be this investment in the human, because if there's no investment in the human, you can have the best tech in the world, but it's not going to give you the solution. Next slide, please. And one of the things I've done with quite a lot of organizations is I've helped them on that roadmap, where, as you can see, the technical part of it is inherently essential because of the nature of the threat. But if you don't equip the humans using that tech with an understanding of what they're doing and why they're doing it and what options they've got to help that tech be effective, then by the time you want to try and get to initial operating capability or full operating capability, you possibly wasted a lot, and therefore the investment has not been proportionate to the threat that you thought you faced at the beginning. Next slide, please. So I would leave you with this summary slide, if you like, and hopefully this has helped you to understand the subject a bit more than perhaps you did before you joined the seminar. But if I was to give advice to organizations about how they might want to look at this holistically and look at the whole subject, tech has to be part of the solution, but it has to be good tech. It has to be battle proven. I use an expression where combat experience has to be hardwired into that tech. If it's not being used in a combat environment, or it's not being used in the opportunities that are existent around the world at the minute, and therefore it's proven, then I would be careful about considering investing in it. But it has to be brought into a system where the human is probably and arguably the most important part of it. Because if the human doesn't understand what the bad, nefarious actor is trying to do to them, and that is a combination of education, training, and intelligence, that's then completed through exercising, it doesn't really matter what you've got with you on your shoulder or with you around you in terms of threat, you're not going to get the response that you need for it. Because if you don't understand that threat properly and create the proportionate response to that threat, then everybody's got stakeholders. It doesn't matter who you represent. Those stakeholders are not going to be happy with the procurement process that's going to fall out of that. And I'll leave you with this thought, you know, and I agree with what Liran said about pizzas and packages. You know, my generation are going to still think that everything that flies dies, and it's going to be scary. But the reality is, our youngsters are going to think more about pizzas and packages. But if we're not thinking about swarming, and if we're not thinking about counter UAS, then we're already behind the drag curve. And thankfully, a lot of organizations in the world are thinking about that. So next slide, please. I hope that's been useful to you, just as a sort of few snippets for you to consider. And if you want to read a bit more about it, I've written an article on LinkedIn called Chasing the Drone Ghost that sort of explains a lot of those principles. And hopefully that has been of use to you. Over to you, Adelia.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thank you so much, Liran, for your presentations. I think you got some people's attention here, to say the least. I'll try and kind of start discussing the lessons that we've learned since October 7th terror attacks here in Israel. Again, nothing classified, obviously, nothing. This only represents, you know, the lessons learned by Sentrycs as a company, and I ask you to take it as it is. So I think when we look at what happened, we can split it into three. One is before the attack, during the confrontation, and what's been happening since then. I think that, you know, at a high level, we got additional reinforcement that commercial drones really represent a significant security threat, and that's for all the reasons mentioned by Liran. And we know that, you know, commercial drones have been used all along before October 7th. We now understand that they were gathering intelligence, and therefore, if there's one thing that, you know, we could recommend is not to ignore drones that might be hovering above critical infrastructure or sensitive sites, and try and understand, you know, where are these drones coming from? Where are they flying? What are they looking at? Because that can give you some real insight into what potential targets might be out there, and each one in its specific role, I think, can relate to that. You know, during the attack, and that's again to your point, Sean, the fact that, you know, being a completely operational solution, sadly, after October 7th, we're learning a tremendous lot. A few of the lessons are that during battle, but not only, I mean, I think it's an insight that is relevant for law enforcement agencies as well. You need a solution that is entirely automated and autonomous. You know, soldiers on the ground cannot afford to spend their time looking at the sky for in order to understand whether there's a drone above them or not. And as someone told me from a European army, you know, we know the threat is here. We just don't have more personnel to deal with it. So you really want to have a solution that is entirely autonomous and simply alerts and takes action, actually, when a commercial drone is entering a no-fly zone. So that's one thing. The second point is, you know, a counter UAS solution must be able to be deployed and to operate in an environment that is completely jammed and spoofed, right? And that's something that we've understood how critical it is. I mean, during working with security forces, you understand that you're not in a vacuum. There's tons of technology out there. There's a lot of RF noise, and you need to be able to operate despite that. So having a solution that is not sensitive to RF noise is critical. One more point, and this is absolutely critical, and you just referred to it, Sean, in the Jordan attack on military troops. The ability for a counter-UAS solution to differentiate between authorized drones and unauthorized drones is absolutely adamant, because we've seen that drones are being used for so many important and positive purposes, and you must be able to understand which one of the drones do you need to take down. So that's really something that is critical, and many of the traditional solutions, as we will see in a second, are falling short when it comes to differentiating between friends and foes. And maybe the last point that I want to mention that was critical and is still critical during a battle or war is it's relevant for a civilian environment as well. Any terror attack, you want to be able to close the loop and locate the operators. A, to gather intel, and B, to apprehend or just neutralize the operator. So that these are all kind of capabilities that we received so much reinforcement that they are critical when it comes to counter-UAS solutions. And since then, I think what we are realizing is that there's a critical need to protect populated areas. So anywhere that we see energy plants, critical infrastructure, prisons, airports, you name it, the need is there. And you need to be able to analyze and understand, again, what are the sensitive areas or sites or people that are being targeted. And for that, you need the analytics, you need the BI, you need to be able to understand, okay, in this area, in this zone, these are the drones that are operating, they are coming from wherever, and they are looking at X, Y, and Z. And maybe if there's one thing I'd like you to kind of take away from this session is that no counter-UAS solution is kind of a procure, deploy, and sit back type of solution. You need a solution that constantly adapts and is quick in doing so, because the threat is constantly changing. And so I think that's one of the key messages I'd like you to take away from this session today. You need a counter-UAS solution that is agile and adaptive enough to keep up and outpace the threat. So as Sean mentioned, no silver bullet. Whether we look at detection, tracking, and identification solutions or mitigation solutions, we see that they all have drawbacks, right? I mean, whether it's lots of false targets in the case of radars, through not being able to differentiate between friends and foes, or creating collateral damage, you name it. There's simply no silver bullet. And that's why we see very often that many of our customers are actually adopting a kind of a multi-layer approach. And we'll see in a second how do the synergies operate between the different types of solutions. So just in a few words about Sentrycs, we are a solution that supports the entire counter-UAS life cycle. So that's in itself is quite unique. We are able to detect passively communication signals between commercial drones and their remote controls. We are able to track and identify them. So when I'm saying identify, it's the drone type, its unique serial number, meaning we can definitely understand whether this is a friend or a foe drone. The location of the drone, its altitude, and the last known location of the controller as well. We then pair ourselves with the drone and basically make believe that we are the remote control, and we take over the drone and redirect it to a predefined landing zone, or just sending it back home. We actually use several types of mitigation, so I won't get into all the details. But just the fact that we are a safe mitigation system that does not create collateral damage also means that we can operate in an urban environment and not only in a war zone. So that's about us. I was talking about the importance of being able to adapt. So this is threefold. Basically, it's adapting to any environment through the fact that we don't generate any false alarms. So we'll provide a very accurate image or situational picture of the sky. We don't create interference with other GPS or GNSS systems. We can operate in a multi-sensor deployment type, meaning that we are unlimited in terms of the area that we can cover and protect. And we can detect, track, identify, and mitigate an unlimited number of drones, meaning that we support swarms as well. So that's also something that we've seen is important. We fit ourselves as well to your operational requirements. So whether it's a portable solution, an on-the-move solution in a vehicle mounted solution, whether it's stationary or tactical, we have all sorts of different deployments. Again, always operating in an autonomous way, and using really off-the-shelf hardware just to be efficient. And the third way that we adapt is really to adjusting to your configuration. We are very aware of the fact that we're not operating, again, in a vacuum, and that you may already have different systems and security technologies in place. Our architecture is actually very open. We have an open API. We can integrate with other systems, and we can either be a standalone solution or within a multi-layered security system. The solution itself is very easy to operate. You don't need any advanced training. It's very user-friendly, and it allows you to manage the missions, but also learn from the debriefs. So this is something that it is also important, as we know that resources are scarce. And maybe I'll leave you with this thought. As we said, the threat is constantly changing, constantly morphing. There's no silver bullet. And therefore, when we look at the different types of technology, we're not saying in any way that one is better than the other. We do think, obviously, that we've got a lot to offer and a lot of value, but there are quite a lot of synergies between the different types of technologies. Just to mention a couple of examples, if we filter out false alarms from radars, radars on the other end will be able to detect dark drones that we as a solution will not be able to support. So that's just one example. So there are definitely synergies, and we're more than happy, and we are actually doing so, working with customers that use several types of technologies. And I think that's where what Sean, you were referring to as the framework, and not only, you know, it requires a lot of education and understanding to put in place all this technology and what is really needed in each and every use case. And I think, you know, obviously we're a technology company. There's a lot of education to be made, and there's kind of frameworks that can probably help a lot in assessing each and every scenario that you guys are dealing with. So I think that that's what we had for you for today. I know there are a few questions, a couple of questions actually. I'm not sure we'll be able to answer all of them, but I'll just address a couple, and the rest we'll take offline with your permission. So your solution detects all types of UAVs, all known radio frequencies. Okay, so good question. Sentrycs is actually supporting commercial drones. So in terms of frequencies, it's 2.4, 5.2, 5.8, and low band, so 400, 800, 900. Okay, these are the frequencies. A question for Sean. I'm curious on your thoughts regarding treatment of potential UAS threats versus confirmed UAS threats in risk mitigation, particularly regarding CUAS mitigation technologies. Sorry. At this point in time, it seems that CUAS mitigation technologies are substituting known risks for potential but unconfirmed risks. From a risk mitigation standpoint, this is simply unacceptable for the majority of incidents. How do you see this evolving?
Yeah, if I understand your, right, can you hear me, Odelia? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
If I understand your question, what you're basically saying is that people are starting to synthesize future risks before they've been proven. Is that correct, Chris? Is that what you're suggesting? If it is, I'll try and answer my view, if you like, on this. I totally accept the fact that, you know, you can turn into a Bond villain really quickly with this kind of threat mitigation. You can turn into somebody who can fear the world is going to collapse around you because these drones are capable of doing more than what they really are. I think I would answer this question by saying to you that the proportionality is where the answer is in this, and proper threat-based analysis. Now, we don't know what we don't know, but there are people that do know what the baseline of the intelligence is for the country or the organization that you're working within. So I'm making an assumption that we have all the intelligence available to us in terms of any specific intent to create a disruption against you in whatever context that is, whatever your organization does. The thing for me is that we've got lots of evidence of drones being used globally, but very few people are looking at this globally on a daily basis. There's a couple of really good organizations out there. DroneSec's one of them, you know, just to mention one. Others are available, but that does this analysis on an hour-by-hour basis internationally across the globe. And I find that a lot of our stakeholders that we're trying to influence, either to get resource or to get a buy-in to go down the road of counter UAS, won't know what's just happened in Brazil yesterday. And frankly, they won't care what's just happened in Brazil because it's probably not their sector. It's certainly not their continent. But in reality, if we as professionals in this game ignore that and don't think for 1 minute that with the globalization of technology is what it is, that we're not going to see that kind of threat where we are, then we're being naive. But I think your point is, let's not over exaggerate the threat. And I totally and utterly agree with that. I totally and utterly agree with that. But this is novel hardware. This is novel threats. This is asymmetric threats, if you like, that's moved on in the last 10 years to what we thought asymmetric threats were 10 years ago. Because I know what I would do. And frankly, I would use racing drone technology on first-person view on range extenders to come in at 150 knots at 50 feet to do something that I need to do, you know, without changing the classification of this presentation. Chris, I don't know if I've answered your question, but is there any way of you giving me a thumbs up or down to indicate that I have?
Well, hopefully so. In the meantime, I will take a few more questions. So do you identify all the drones of the market? So, Dario, just to be clear, we identify, we are a library-based solution, okay? We focus on commercial drones, so any DJI, Parrot, Hotel, and many DIY kits. We are constantly adding drones to our library. Again, it's part of, you know, what I was saying. The threat is constantly changing, and therefore we are constantly adapting as well. We do it in a very agile way and very quickly. So I hope that answers your question. How many drones can you mitigate at the same time and make a safe landing? Okay, so for each sensor, okay, because you can actually deploy our solution in a multi-sensor way in order to cover a larger area. But I would say for each sensor, we are able by default to detect four drones at a time and safe land them one by one. But in fact, we can increase the number. It just means that the latency will be increased in terms of refreshment of the tracking. But I hope that gives you an answer. We can further elaborate on that offline. Anonymous attendee, what is the operation range? So if you're asking about the detection range, again, it very much depends on the level of RF noise in a given environment. But from what we've seen in open environments, we can detect between 4 and 5 kilometers, and sometimes even further away. Detection is closer, but that's basically the high level range. Okay, how does the system defend against multi-directional attacks? Well, again, we have omni antennas, and we don't have a problem with that. If we already have a system, can we change the software control to use yours? What I mean is leaving the hardware and adding new Sentrycs hardware and use your software. So you can do either or. You can use our software as your C2, or you can actually integrate our software into your existing software. So it can work either way. Do we only read RF? So we read the communication protocol between drones and their remote controls. How many drones do you have in the library? So it's hundreds. But the real question here is, you know, do you support the most recent drones in your library? And the answer is yes. I think, you know, the number, I mean, you can support very old drones and it doesn't really matter. So you can have a huge library, but with completely irrelevant drones. The secret sauce, if you will, is to really support the latest and greatest drones in the market. Okay. For this webinar or the slide be able available for download. Sorry. So actually the webinar, first of all, you will be getting the recording of this webinar. I think it's up to Liran and Sean whether they are happy to share their slides. I guess there is some copyright around that, but the recording of the webinar itself will be made available and it will be posted on our website as well shortly. Hello, Sean, Odelia, great presentation. Thank you, guys. Can we detect? Okay. Okay, what's your email? What's your email? So I think the best way maybe is for you to go to our website, Sentrycs.com, and go to the contact us and we'll see your inquiry. Carlos, have we answered your question? I'm not sure. I can see some people are actually raising their hands, but if you have something specific to ask, then please use the chat box. I think it will be easier. Okay. Okay, I mean that I'm very happy because there's a lot of questions, but we're out of time. So I just would like to thank you all for your time and participation. We will take the time to address the questions that you've sent us in the chat box. Gosh, there's 38 questions that we haven't answered just yet. That's a busy Sunday for me. We will address them. That's a promise. You will hear back from us. Thanks again for listening. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Liran. And thank you, guys. See you soon.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.